Hello lovely humans, it's Lou here for Simply Crochet, and in today's video we are going to be taking a closer look at the Crocodile Stitch pattern from issue 49. Not only does this include the general basic swatch pattern that you can see on the left hand page, but it does also include a pattern for a gorgeous tea cozy and pot holder combination. So I've worked up a small swatch here for you guys just so that I can show you a bit better how it moves and how lovely and squishy it is. Now it's made up of a number of treble crochet stitches for the most part. If you're not familiar with treble crochet, I have put a little video link in the bottom left hand corner so that you can go and check out our instructional video on that and get yourself brushed up. Croc stitch is an incredibly tactile and complicated looking stitch, but it's absolutely full of texture and really isn't as complicated as it first appears. It is very yarn hungry though, so please do be prepared to spend a little bit extra on yarn if you're looking to create a project on a larger scale with this stunning stitch. Now these patterns use a very slightly different technique for Crocodile Stitch than I usually use, but we will touch on that in a later video. With Crocodile Stitch, you want to be starting off with a chain in a multiple of 6 plus 3. For this particular example, I have started with 15, so that is 2 times 6 plus 3. So what you want to do first is work a treble crochet into the third stitch along from the hook. Now those first few missed stitches will count as your first treble crochet, so you should have 2 treble crochets sitting nicely next to each other at this point. Then we want to chain 1, we want to skip the next 2 chains and insert a treble crochet into the third. We then want to chain 1 again. And now again, we're going to skip 2 and insert a treble crochet into the third, but this time we're going to be putting 2 treble crochet into that same space. We're then going to chain 1, and following along in the same sort of pattern, we skip 2 and insert 1 treble crochet into the third chain along. We then chain 1 again, skip 2 chains and insert 2 treble crochet into that last stitch of our foundation chain. So you should now have something that looks a bit like a ladder, and it will have 2 trebles, 1, 2, 1 and 2, and that will be the same regardless of how long your foundation chain was. The 2 treble clusters will be where your scales will sit, and the 1 treble on its own will be where you attach your scale at the top. So we're going to turn our work, and to start the next round we are going to do 3 chains. Now this is going to count as our first stitch, and what we're going to do is we're going to go back down to that first row, to our ladder, and we're going to work into the post through the back like so. So these are all going to be trebles, and because we've already got our first stitch, we're only going to be doing 4 in here to begin with. So we do 4 treble crochet into that post. So that's 1, 2, 3, and there is our 4th. So you should now have what looks to be 5 treble crochet into that first post. So now we've got our first little cluster, and that is the first half of our first scale. So we want to be working around almost like an upside down rainbow kind of shape. So instead of going from the right into our post, we're actually going to slightly turn our work and work into it from the other side. Now this can be fiddly, so it can sometimes help to almost pinch that treble crochet stitch and kind of work our 5 trebles into it that way. Just stops you from getting all muddled up, and it makes it a little bit less fiddly. It's still fiddly, but it's slightly less fiddly if you kind of pinch that post and hold it out of the way of the rest of your work. So once we flip it back, we will see that we have now got our very first scale finished. Now it does look a little bit odd to begin with, and until it's kind of squished against other scales, you will get a kind of a bit of a hole in the middle, and that's perfectly normal. So our scale is looking a little bit flappy at the moment, so in order to fix it onto our little foundation ladder below, we are going to insert a slip stitch into the top of that very lonely 1 treble crochet. And now it's nice and fixed on and stable. So we're going to move on to our next scale. Now, just as before, we're going to be working into that right hand post. We are going to be doing 5 treble crochet this time, as we don't have our initial starting 3 chain that we had at the beginning of the row. So we'll work 5 treble crochet into that first post, coming in from the right hand side as before. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go round and up by working into it from the other side. So we'll pinch our little treble post, and then we are going to insert 5 treble crochet into that side as well. There's 4, and the last one makes 5. Now at the end of each scale, I do find it helpful to kind of put things back and have a good look at them to try and get your bearings, because this can be a stitch that throws you off and you end up crocheting off in a totally different direction to what you're supposed to be doing. So just sort of turn it round, flatten things out a little bit, and have a look at where you're at. So once again, we're going to fix our scale into the top of that foundation chain treble by inserting our hook, yarning over and pulling through, and then pulling through that last loop for our slip stitch. So once we come to the end of our row, regardless of how long your project is, this final scale is going to be slightly different and is actually going to be the exact opposite of the scale that we did at the beginning. So just to be clear, in the first post we are going to work 5 treble crochet as usual and as we've done all the way along. So there's number 4 and number 5. So again, we're just going to turn it around to try and get our bearings and figure out what we're doing. Now, when we start working into the next post, we'll be doing it basically in the opposite way to how we started the round. So we'll be doing 4 treble crochet stitches into that post, and then we'll be doing 3 chain stitches. So we'll start off, we'll do our first treble crochet into that stitch. And there's number 2, number 3, and number 4. And now what we're going to do to make up that 5th stitch is we are going to chain 3. There's 1, 2, 3. Now to fix that in place so that it works as our 5th stitch, we're going to slip stitch into the top of the center of that scale. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to start our next row. So we want to create that kind of ladder for us to work around again. So first we're going to do 2 chain stitches. Now these aren't going to count as a stitch. Now what we're going to do is insert a treble crochet stitch into the top between those 2 scales from the previous round. So we're going to do our first treble crochet in there, and then we're going to insert another one into the same hole. Now, as we did with our very first row, we are going to chain 1, and then what we're going to do is insert 1 treble crochet into that gap right in the center of the next scale. So there's our 1 treble crochet. Again, we are going to chain 1, and now we're going to put 2 treble crochet into the top of the in-between of those 2 next scales. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be the neatest thing, just find somewhere comfortable to put your 2 trebles, because that will ultimately be covered up by the scale that you create on top of that cluster anyway, so it's not the most important thing. So now what we're going to do is we are going to chain 1, and then we are going to insert 1 treble crochet into the gap in the center of that final scale, and there we have our 1 2 1 2 1 ladder created all over again for the next row of scales. So as we did before, we are going to chain 3. Now we're going to ignore that very first post, and we're just going to work into the next cluster of 2. So we're going to do exactly what we've done with all the other scales, which is we are going to put what is a total of 5 treble crochet, but because we've done our chain 3 at the beginning, we only need to do 4 at the start of this row. And there is our little cluster of 5. Put everything back where it's meant to be so that we don't get too confused. And then, as before, we are going to turn our work slightly and pinch, and we're going to work 5 treble crochet into that post from the other side to create the other half of our lovely scale. And there's number 5. So then we're going to firstly admire the beautiful scale that we've just created, which is covering up what was potentially messy from the row before. And again, we are going to slip stitch into the top of that 1 lonely treble crochet so that we can sort of attach our scale more firmly onto that ladder. Then we are going to do the same, but obviously since I'm only doing 2 in this row, obviously it'll be slightly different for you depending on your pattern, but I will be doing a similar thing that I did in the previous row right at the end, which is to insert 5 treble crochet into that first post, and then I will be putting 4 and a chain of 3 into the second post. So there is my first cluster, and now I'm going to work into the second post along to create the other half of my scale. And as I said before, we're going to be doing 4 treble crochet stitches, and then we're going to be doing our chain of 3 as we did at the end of the last row. Now obviously the video is really just for illustration purposes and just to kind of show you how to build up your scales. Of course, do please follow your written pattern and make sure that you're doing everything that it states in there, but we've got this video here for you just to give you a little bit of extra guidance, because it can be one of those patterns that doesn't quite come out very well on paper and can be a little bit hard to process. So that is our second scale. Now the way that this works is it's going to work up like almost like bricks. So you'll have 3, then 2, then 3, then 2, or 5, then 4, then 5, then 4, and so on. So what we're going to do now is we are going to fix that scale into the very top of that final treble that we did to finish off that row. Now what we want to do is we want to create 3 scales, or one more than we have in that previous row. We want to create an extra one in the next row. Now, so that we don't end up with a kind of pyramid shape, we want to kind of try and work into it in such a way that we're going to create a whole new scale. So we want to do chain of 3, and then we want to insert our hook into the bottom of that chain and do a treble crochet. And as before, that starts us off with 2 treble crochet at the beginning to do our extra little scale. So we're going to chain 1. We are going to insert a treble crochet into the center gap of that next scale. We're going to chain 1. And now we're going to put 2 treble crochet into the top between those 2 scales below us. Again, doesn't need to be in any exact place. It will be covered by the scale above, so don't worry about that too much. And there is our second treble crochet. Now we are going to chain 1. We are going to insert a treble crochet into the center of that second scale. Then we're going to chain 1 again. And then in the very top left corner of that final scale, we are going to do 2 treble crochet. And now you'll notice that again we have this kind of 2 1 2 1 2 laddering sort of scenario that we had at the very beginning, and that will leave us with a space for 3 scales. So from this point on, you are looking at roughly the same sort of techniques all the way across the board. Obviously, as I said before, do follow your pattern and make sure that you're doing exactly what it says so that things don't go all higgledy-piggledy, but do come and look back on this video for reference if needs be. As usual, thank you very much for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure having you here, and I do hope that this video has gone some way to helping you out with the crocodile stitch and making it seem a little bit less daunting, because it can look a little bit intimidating from a distance. You will get comfortable with it, but if you do have any problems at all, either with the written pattern or with today's tutorial video, please do leave a comment below, or you can message us through our Facebook page. We would also love to see what you make with this gorgeous stitch, so please do send us lots of scrummy pictures of your gorgeous issue 49 makes. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, and we will see you very soon.